am Campbell Miller, husband, father of two, and feature film director with EWTN. Faith and Life tells the stories of Catholics living their life through their faith. These inspiring people tell us where they have come from and where God is taking them. Welcome to the second programme in this Faith and Life two-part special about Marion Carroll and her 17-year battle with MS and her miraculous healing at Ireland's National Shrine back in 1989. In our first programme, Marion described the events of that life-changing day.
If you left me lying that way in the morning, I stayed like that till he came back at night. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything for myself. When my bishop came down to Blessed Eucharist and the monstrance for the blessing of the sick, and he came in front of the stretcher and he held it up and he blessed me, it was at that time that I got this beautiful feeling, a magnificent feeling, and like a whispery breeze telling me that if the stretcher was open that I could get up and walk. I've been very down-to-earth and practical. I thought I should have more sense in getting ideas like this, and I go home and tell Jimmy, he'd definitely think I'm nuts. And I wasn't going to tell anybody.
The words were going round, Marion Carroll is moving, Marion Carroll is moving. And everybody was excited, happy, and cheerful with joy.
What year were you diagnosed with MS?
I was sick from the December after I got married, and in 1978 was finally that I was seen to. I was with slipped discs. I was supposed to have slipped discs. I was supposed to have this. I was even sent to a psychologist, and he'd throw me out. And eventually then, because I had such bad kidney infections constantly, I was sent to a urologist in Dublin, and he noticed something and got a neurologist. And that's when he sent for Jimmy and told Jimmy that I probably had MS, because that time it's only as it progressed, that I could end up in a wheelchair, I could end up mild or bedridden, and that with him being away, that I might need help, you know.
And how bad did it actually get?
At that time when I was diagnosed, it was all one side. And I was like that for a good while. And then I got a bit of remission, you know, which was grand. It was almost normal except for the tiredness and things like that. And I just lived my life. You know, you learn to adjust to something that is nothing in your life in a sense. But then in 85, I started going downhill slowly. I wasn't worried about nothing could do for me. Then I lost the power in my legs. Then I lost power in my right arm and hand. I had a catheter in. I remember thinking, well, I can still see, but I lost sight in this eye, and I'd only limited, you know, I couldn't really. This eye was a lot better, but not a lot. And it ended up that I had to be washed, fed, changed, and moved.
When I first met Marion as a patient, I can remember the ward. I can remember the number of the ward. It was number 14, and there were 2 beds in it. Marion was in under the window and Marion would be propped up in the bed, and that was her, from what I can remember, the extent or the range of her movements. And Jimmy, her husband, would come in at lunchtime, which he never missed, and he would guide the little plastic beakers that we used going back then for feeding. And I think it might have been the first time I saw a bendy straw. And that was Marion's way of, and it would be fixed here Marion's head back like that, and she might move this way or that way. She was totally paralysed, needed 24-hour nursing care, which involved all activities of daily living.
You know, I could do nothing for myself.
And how did that affect the family?
You know, we didn't have a lot of money, but we had a lot of love, and that's everything. We were rich. You know, I had a husband that really cared, and children, and we loved one another. And I was never made feel as if I was an inconvenience or that. Even when that time the army got paid cash, and I used to have a little teapot, and Jimmy'd bring it in, leave it beside the bed, and the money went in there. So if they wanted sugar or tea or that, they'd come in, and I'd say, take it out of the teapot. You know, so it was all...
So you just got by in the end?
We got by in the end, you know, because it was just the love that was there, and that's what counted. You know, we were a family, and I used to think that, you know, how lucky I was, because there's those out there and they're perfect health, but they're not happy in their lives, and there's envy and jealousy and resentment. We had it all here, everything you could want in life, you know, and we got by. We did, you know, we didn't have a lot, but we got by. And
of course, you're well known for the unexplained healing that happened in Knock, and which changed your life completely.
Yes.
But how did you end up going down to Knock that day?
Well, I was in Athlone Hospital for respite, and Jerry Glynn, we knew one other growing up, and Jerry was the ambulance driver, and he was also in the Order of Malta. And Jerry said to me one day, he used to come up and see me in the ward, Marion, would you like to go to Knock? And I said, I'd love to go to Knock for a day, but I had really no intention of going. I wanted to go to Lourdes that year. I wanted so much. And I really had no intention of going. But the Friday before I went to Knock, my kidneys got a lot worse, and Dr. Patrick came out and he told me I need to go to hospital as soon as possible. But for some reason, when I told him about Jerry and Knock, he said, right, Marion, you can go to Knock on Sunday, but be ready for hospital on Monday.
And what did you expect to happen going to Knock?
Nothing. I thought I could sleep for the day if I didn't want to, because I really didn't want to go. You see, my brain was affected as well, because Jimmy could say to me, was Campbell in to see you? I haven't seen him in years. And you could be passing him out the door. I'd forget. But, you know, I just thought to myself, well, I don't have to, you know, worry about anything. If I need to sleep, I'll sleep, and the whole lot. And Jimmy gave me my first course that morning and of drugs. And they put me into the stretcher, and when we got to Knock, they brought the stretcher into St. John's, the resting care for the sick, and they brought me into the nurse. She'd done all the things you do for my position, and then they brought me over to Basilica in Knock.
In 2019, the church passed that this was an unexplained healing that happened that day. That must have been a monumentous moment for yourself and your family.
It was in one sense. But for me, the most important thing was, you know, I am nothing special, and why Jesus chose me, I don't know. Bishop Dominic Conway, Lord rest him, said, because I trusted him so much. But for me that day was to let the world know the true presence of the living Christ in the Eucharist, and the power of the true presence.
I reserve a very special welcome for Marion Carroll and her husband Jimmy and their family. As you know, 30 years ago, on the occasion of this pilgrimage, Marion was healed here at Our Lady's Shrine.
Today in Knock we had the official declaration of the healing of Marion Carroll. This is unique for Knock because it's actually officially recognised now by the Church through her bishop, Bishop Francis Duffy, that Marion was healed 30 years ago in Knock.
I think today's event of acknowledging and declaring this is the first official healing at Knock is a great good news story for the Church. In Marion's own book, she talked about this not being just about her, but about something for everyone. That is a good news story, not just for her and her family, but for all people of faith. It's really a good news story for everyone. And I think that that is the case. And people are very happy, very joyful that this is now acknowledged as a healing in Knock.
What was involved was 30 years of investigation into her case. As you can imagine, no more than with apparitions and with anything else of a supernatural kind of aspect, that the church takes its time. It doesn't rush in. You don't go straight in and say, great, there's a healing. It has to be examined thoroughly, scientifically, and through the eyes of faith as well. So that took 30 years because of the condition itself. Not a huge amount was known of MS at the time. So what the Commission of Inquiry decided was that, well, we need to let medicine evolve and progress to see, is this actually a healing? Is this something that can be substantiated? And can we officially recognise it? So I know 30 years is a long, long time, but it is well worth the walk and the pilgrimage through that to recognise it today.
Marion herself was the one that never lost trust and confidence in the process, even though she must have felt disappointed things were delayed and had to take time. But she persevered in a very positive way and in a very respectful way. So I commend her for that and commend the process as well, because everything was correctly done.
Well, the church is very careful about these issues and these matters, so it has to be very prudent, and it often works slowly in these matters. And I think in this case, what has been declared is a healing for which there's no medical explanation. So Knock is taking its cue there from practices in Lourdes, which is a place of great pilgrimage. And what we're saying there is that this is definitely a healing, but there is no medical explanation for it. That's really the result of various investigations, and there were investigations into it, naturally enough, but that is the end result. Certainly a healing, without doubt a healing, and people who knew Marion in the past, 30 years ago, will certainly attest to the fact that she was definitely healed. There was a dramatic, immediate change in her. Before Knock, she was in a stretcher, she had to be helped and so on, and then immediately after the blessing in Knock, she was feeling better, a lot better. She was able to walk where she hadn't been able to walk. So you can't get more dramatic than that. So those who knew her, those who were there at the time and still around, they testify to that. So there is no doubt about that, whatever.
So 30 years later, so that must have been a long wait for the church to finally
It was, and I actually never knew what was going on all them years. It was just, it was getting to the stage where really the media were asking me what was going on. When I was going to schools, the question was asked. When I was in churches, the question was asked. And I just thought to myself, I can't keep saying the same thing. So I just one day asked whether it was, what was happening. And they called a meeting and it was passed. And actually it was passed well before that, but I didn't know it.
Right.
And it was decided then, that was in January of 2019, and we didn't want us to tell anybody, and that the day of our pilgrimage that it would be announced. It was very hard because I couldn't even tell my family, and because in case they let us sleep, and it was doubly hard because Jimmy's nephew was getting married in Spain, and we couldn't even tell them why we weren't going, and then, but would you believe if I told you that the majority of the people in the Basilica that day when it was packed were actually people got some sort of a blessing from my ministry. I was just went word around I was celebrating 30 years, and they came from all over. So they did, and
so it was a lovely moment for you and your
family. It was a lovely moment for me because now people knew, and I didn't have to try and explain, about it. What the proceedings. You were talking about the proceedings to go through and that, and I just wanted, whether it was passed or not, to know.
I don't think medically it can be explained. I genuinely don't. From what I witnessed, while she was a patient and I was her nurse. I would not have a clue how any medical person could explain that.
Have you ever thought about why me? Why was I healed that day?
Why me? I don't know why me. I'm nothing special. I'm a very ordinary person. But I didn't understand it. I was surprised it was me because I was always last, you know. I could never be first no matter what, and I was always the one that was left out. And the fact that of all the people who were there that day, that he reached out and made me whole again. I didn't want to talk to any papers or anything. I wasn't interested in any of that. But I was invited to talk in churches. I remember the first interview I gave was for a priest for Christmas, but he said he wouldn't give my name. And
so you found a ministry out of all of this?
I didn't at that time. I was invited to churches. The first church I was invited to, Jimmy was on duty and he couldn't come, so a friend of mine, Father Tom, brought me. And I was in this church, sitting in this special seat, and I was going up to tell my story. And I remember thinking to myself, this is not me, I shouldn't be doing this. And I said, Lord, will you please give me a sign? And our bishop gave us, for the first anniversary, he gave us 2 readings for the readings at Knock. And Jimmy learned his off by heart. We all learned Jimmy's because he was saying it. And the first reader got up that night and made a mistake, opened the wrong page, and she wrote, "The people that walked in darkness have seen a great light." And I thought, well, that's really Christmas, so this is, you know, it could be a sign. And I thought to myself, no, it's your imagination. But if the second reader didn't get up and make the same mistake and wrote, so I thought, Lord, this is where you want me. And I went to spoke in churches, so I did, and I went to a couple of schools, and then
you also then became
a handmaid the year
handmaiden
afterwards.
Yes.
Well, I was kind of told I was going to be a handmaid.
Really? Here's a photograph
my
of
mother
yourself
and myself,
with the handmaiden uniform.
Yes.
And this is your mother?
My mother,
yeah.
Yes. And it was lovely being a handmaid because, you know, at that time I would give out the tea and things like that, and it was lovely. And you felt called then to do that? Yes, I loved doing it because people would come in and I knew what they were going through. See, I realised, Campbell, that the Lord brought me to brink of death, that I can go to a person that's very, very sick, and everybody else will see the physical part, but I know what they're feeling inside. The emptiness, the loneliness, no matter how much love you have, there's a deep loneliness. And I loved working with them because I you know, through all I went through, I had the patience to listen to them.
Well, Marion has been a member of Carroll, as we are now known, previously known as the Knock Shrine Handmaids and Stewards. She has been a member of that since 1990. And she works the first Sunday of every month here during the pilgrimage season. And Marion just is the same as any other member of Carroll here. She comes here, attends Mass at 11 a.m. as we all do, then we go about her day's work. Marion's work would basically be involved in the resting care, St. John's resting care, dealing with people there who wish to have tea served to them, collecting up the dishes afterwards, bringing them up to be washed and put away and everything like that. But the most important part of Marion's ministry during the day would be meeting people who have come here on pilgrimage, who have heard that she's in the building. She would sit with them, talk to them, listen to their problems, pray with them.
I have seen her devotion to people. I have seen the way she's so organised and so respected. Marion is always at the end of a phone to help somebody. Or she'll always say, "Can't you come in for a cup of tea?" or "We'll meet and have a cup of coffee." But Marion, I think and I believe, she has given herself to whoever wants a prayer.
Marion, this photograph here is a lovely photograph, and it's you receiving communion from Pope St. John Paul.
Yes.
And when was this?
That was the beatification of Sister Faustina. I had been asking the Lord about, you know, my ministry, because I enjoyed my life as a mother and a wife and a grandmother. So I was given the present of a ticket to go, and I asked the Lord to arrange that I received Holy Communion from the Holy Father to let me know I was living my life right and my ministries were right. And when I got to my hotel, I was given a brown envelope. I thought it was actually something for the hotel, and it was a special pass up to the very front of beatification, and a special pass to receive Holy Communion from the Holy Father personally. Now, the funny thing was about that, you know, St. Pope John Paul receiving Holy Communion, but when I went up, I remember walking up them steps and I was thinking, here I am receiving the divine Jesus from the one person He's chosen to lead us. And like it was a human monstrance handing me the body of Jesus. And that's all I could think of.
And that helped you then confirm the direction of your ministry?
It did, because I loved my marriage and my family and, you know, our socialising together as well as doing my ministry. So that was important, you know.
That it makes you very emotional thinking of that moment?
It does, because I can never put it into words. I can't put it into words what I felt at that moment, you know.
That ministry then that you were called to, was that praying for people, praying for the sick, looking after the sick?
Praying for people would come to me for prayers and start coming back. The favourite part of my ministry is going to the sick, those that can't come to me. And I speak in churches and schools and spoken in universities, and I've spoken all over the world.
And this photograph here, you're clearly praying for the sister here?
Yes, that's actually in Knock at the Rosary Rally.
And you've mentioned there about Knock, and of course we spoke earlier about 2019 was the year that the church said that there was an unexplained healing that happened that day in Knock. And this lovely photograph here of yourself.
I'm walking in the Eucharistic.
Walking round.
I've always, I always done the Eucharistic procession.
You're walking with the other handmaids, but yet you're not in uniform, so what actually was happening here?
I'm a handmaid myself, and I didn't wear my uniform that day because I felt that to let people know I was an ordinary person like them. If you see in a uniform, they think I was. But I did not want to. For me, it was such a privilege to walk and be so close to the Lord. And I asked Father Richard that day if I could walk without my uniform. He said I could.
What would you say to people today that don't believe that God is working in this world today, given what has happened to you?
See, this is it. People won't look and see what He is doing in their lives. It's very, very important to realise that Jesus knows what's best for us. And He's not so cruel as to cure everybody, because I'll tell you something, it was not easy. Would you believe if I told you I got depressed? I had to learn to live again. I didn't know how to live. You know, I lived in the world, but I didn't belong to the world all the years I was sick. And it was very, very hard. But He's always there, and there's not a day that anybody prays and asks. He'll always answer. But like any father, He knows what's best for a child. Every single part of my life, whether it was joy or hurts or pain or rejection or illness, every part of that was for what I'm doing now. Because if I didn't go through that, how could I understand others, their pain, their suffering, feeling unwanted, feeling that they're alone in the world, or feeling that you know, the depression, no one understands. You have to go, you know. So life, my whole life was a lesson.